Yes, we are now. So,
Thank you so very much. Please welcome to the Children's Services Council Leon County Program Services Committee meeting coming to you from our Leon County Schools facility. I'm glad to be joined by my colleagues, as well as colleagues who are not on our committee. Our treasurer, Paul Mitchell. We are a collegial bunch, and we take great delight in getting input and ideas from all sources. We're also happy to have people from the public who are also joining us. So let's call this meeting to order now at 5:36. I want to give a special recognition to my friends at the Leon County School District Office, Dr. Michelle Gill and Mr. John Hunkier, for making this space available to us that we can have this meeting. So now that the meeting is called to order, we'll now start with our roll call from Ms. Jacinta Clay.
Dr. Glenn, present. Ms. McManus, here. Mr. O'Brien, Ms. Connor, Mr. Jones.
Yes. All right, thank you so very much. We'll now have a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
It's been properly moved and second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All right, our agenda is approved. Now we'll have general public comment. Do we have any public comment? Today, Ms. Clay?
Yeah, let me do one.
All right, thank you. Come on.
Jones, I'm not on TV. Can I sit here or you want me to?
You're more than.
All right. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I know you're about
You gotta say your name.
Oh, sorry, I'm Neil Skeen, live at 3311 Remington Run in Tallahassee. I'm not a lobbyist. I just wanted to make a couple of comments that came to me after the provider forum. I know that's on your agenda to talk about some. And that has, first of all, I was struck, many of the people in the room, know all of you probably knew some are particularly the bigger organizations, but I was struck by the number of very small, almost single person sometimes organizations that were doing apparently very good work. And I'm so glad that you put capacity building into your plan. Mr. Mitchell's done that too. Because I think that there are people doing work who are sort of contributing their own support on doing that. And I hope that this plan, as you provide these programs, will help them build the structure and pass the large number of people they can serve as they do their work. The second thing I wanted to mention, I was struck by that social services will be one of the largest contributors to the Alice population. And you know, all of us who worked in that field certainly know that. It was a sort of a startling comment to think about. And I hope that as you go through this, you keep in mind great challenge, the growing challenge of workforce development as part of fighting for people who are going to serve the kids that serve, including the demands of market compensation and attracting people to a field that's underserved, whether it's mental health, just down at the basic child care, quality child care level. And so I wanted to sort of put that at the front of your mind as you go through this work and recognize that all of these providers are going to need to continue to attract people to work in their organization, to the high quality work that you're going to demand as part of building the evidence base, the accountability, and to keep that as part of funding needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Thank you. Now we'll go to turn it over to our executive director to review the summary of the council's strategic planning session.
All right, so greetings everyone, and thank you for being here. We are going to show a very quick PowerPoint to inform our meeting today and give you a summary of what the council members discussed and where you all landed as a council as far as priorities are concerned. So next slide. As always, we like to start with our theory of change. That is what informs and moves everything that we do as a council And so just be reminded where we are starting with priorities, how we want to create that impact, how we're going to assess the impact so that ultimately ensure that all youth and families are socially and physically equipped to reach their full potential. So a review of the strategic planning workshop. So we talked a little bit about priority areas, funding timelines, and evaluation. So our investment opportunities, and this is the information that we shared at our forum as well, so just keep that in mind. So under success in school and life, the investment opportunities chosen are high quality early learning experiences, some sort of parent engagement coupled with that, quality after school and summer learning opportunities. For healthy children, youth and families, the investment opportunities, prenatal and postnatal support, health and developmental screenings, diagnosis and interventions, oral health, immunization, parent engagement, again, behavioral health services, suicide prevention, substance abuse, family support services, nutrition, and public awareness. And then lastly, under stable and nurturing families and communities, apprenticeships and mentoring, financial literacy, workforce skills, transitional youth services, food stability, supports for children experiencing homelessness, navigators for families, family support services, and emergency funding. So when you look at all of those, the council during that strategic planning workshop came up with these 7 priorities: high quality early learning experiences, parent engagement, family support services, family navigators, prenatal and postnatal supports for children experiencing homelessness, and apprenticeships and mentoring opportunities. And the reason that is starred is because we expect that that will most likely happen during a summer funding opportunity. Now, go ahead.
I'll let you finish. Hold on.
Okay. So in addition to these, there is one other priority that I would like to bring up and consider adding per discussion at this meeting. So if you remember the strategic planning workshop, Commissioner Carolyn Cummings brought up youth gun violence. And even though it did not make those top priorities, it was something that she commented pretty passionately about. Additionally, during the last week, I participated in a stakeholder meeting where different stakeholders came together and contemplated how serious of an issue this has become in this community, specifically discussing the city commission tentative plans right now to invest $1 million over the next 5 years. And so with the gun violence that we're hearing, I mean, it's leading the news, we have youth that are involved. I'd like to ask the chair to maybe open up for some discussion about possibly adding that as an 8th priority. I think that as a council, first of all, the work that you have done as a council is awesome. But I think that we would be maybe not operating in a way that truly speaks to some current needs that we have to tackle by not at least talking about possibly adding gun violence as an 8th priority. So, Chair, I'd like to offer that and then turn it over to you to see if you're like this.
Well, certainly, I'm open to that. Certainly, if more falls on, you have work.
So that's kind of where we are
These are any priorities.
with, yes. And so I think if we pause now and see if the committee would like to discuss it, then maybe move that we recommend adding this as an 8th priority. We
Yes,
would
ma'am.
need to bring it to the full council.
Everybody agrees?
Oh, I have a question. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So, and I honestly value having gun balance as a priority. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, no, very much with my husband teaches. I'm terrified for him to go to school. I mean, I really am. That's a concern that I've never had before. But my concern is, all of these priorities are based on data. Do we have data that shows the incidence of gun violence in the kind of so, well, we know it's important to you because you're scared about your husband going to work. Yeah, I mean, that's value to me, significant to me. To someone who doesn't have that concern, what data can we point to that says we know for a fact that this is an issue?
Oh, you know what we did when we gave the task to Q&Q?
Right?
We told them to review additional anecdotal data that was available to Alice. Among that data, I'm certain they also reviewed was the most recent treaties coming from our Leon County Sheriff, the anatomy of a homicide, which points most specifically to the role that those young people play in our public schools, that those children have all more times than not have already had incidences in school where there was discipline already measured. That's why there's this major push now with the creation of the Commission on Status and Boards, which has now been most recently, it's now going to be held by Royal King, the former director for Leon County Volunteer Services and the founding director for Omega Lamplighters. It is intended that, based upon the research that was discovered in that, you'll remember, and the sheriff, I believe, has presented to the CSC, hasn't he? But we never had.
I've had stakeholder meetings.
Okay, we had mentioned that at one time before, but the reason the city, the county, and the Leon County School District have made the purposeful investments is based upon the research that was compiled that created the basis by which we created this new initiative. So yes, we have the research data that addresses that issue, which validates our addressing this issue as an outcome.
Okay, and my primary concern, I just want to make sure we have something that we can point to. Like, well, we've had that data, like a summary written up or to share with the community, and just want to make sure we do.
We can support the anatomy of a homicide, which I believe should be reading for us anyway. And perhaps we can even in the very near future invite the sheriff and our new director, Royal King, to make the same presentation to us that he is all, well, I don't, the difference is in our competitive funding process, because they may very well come to us for funding, but certainly the source information is worthwhile. And that solves a presentation, but the information, which will provide you some clarity about why Carolyn Cummings makes a point, Commissioner Cummings makes a point that she makes.
Okay, I just want to make sure the
The documentation is there.
That clarified comment, just for the record. It's just the anatomy of a homicide, it wasn't published by the time QQ finished. So while they have evidence in the juvenile arrest information about non-violent crimes, violent crimes, crimes with a weapon, and all of that that is included in the data set, they don't have some of the same findings in the detailed way of the anatomy of a homicide, because it was actually completed a little, or it was presented a little bit later, but they did reference it and they did have stakeholder meetings with the sheriff's office. I just want to be clear that you're not going to look at our needs assessment and find that.
Right. So if I may share, the anatomy of a homicide is available on LCSO, from the sheriff's office. It is available on their website, and we will send that to first the committee members, and then we can send that to the council members in advance of the meeting at which this will be discussed. Yes. And then the next piece, if I will, that I'll be sure to get to you all is also in 2016, there was a cure violence proposal done with the city of Tallahassee. The officials at that time chose not to move forward with that proposal, but that was another type of report that looked at some possible solutions to address that issue. So I did want to put that out there, and that is something that we can get and share out.
This man.
Just 2 comments. I know when we had a conversation at the state planning meeting, there was some talk of, well, can we merge things in to some of what exists, right? So
we're gonna have a round of innovation fund, and we talk about merging this idea of gun violence in there. And, you know, when I think about things that have been shown nationally to really impact this, it often is people who lived similar issues turn around and became mentors. And so I kind of wonder if we shouldn't be pushing, given that they're gonna have $1 million a year, $1 million a year. And when I try to look at the biggest bang for the buck, if it's, you know, investing in mentoring programs or something else, I kind of feel like again, we can make it a priority, but I almost think it could fit under those other buckets that we have there. If we're focused on this as an issue, I get worried about so many buckets that
Well, let me,
versus integrating it in.
well, I understand where you're coming from. One, I'm sure there is a. I have no problem with it rising to a priority. What we do, I think one of the ways we heighten it is that if, as a part of responses to any programs that we have, them addressing how it may very well be the salvo. So, for example, it's not even necessarily fund a gun violence program specifically, but if in, say, for example, the creation of a new boys mentoring program or a boys school or something, that here somehow they are providing responses that in some way mitigate. I think that the current crisis that we're in, to not include it as a priority would mean that we were really putting our heads in the sand. But there are ways that we can address it without necessarily creating a new bucket for funding, but it can be addressed across the areas of responsiveness.
I think you get further by doing that than putting it separately.
So what I'm hearing is similar to what we did before with mental health. So mental health wasn't specifically a separate line, but when we did the summer funding, every program that addressed mental health got extra credit.
Yes.
So it's there across the board. So if we have these priority areas, whatever we do, we will ask them, be innovative in how you address youth gun violence as a part of that. Then that way it's included in everything. But we could see that in family supports, you know, family navigators even helping with that sound. I don't know. Right. Mentor, so that's the way we can address it.
Good, thanks. You said it in less words than I appreciate that. But again, and I think I agree with you and what you described and what you described. So I just can't help but wonder if our current crisis does not lend itself that it is enumerated as a priority.
Well, I think we're back to Robert's point, is that if you didn't put mental health there, health is the cause of gun violence. You know, and we did the school strategic planning thing, and we came out with these top 7. And we're not, and I guess we need to take the staff board and have them vote on it as well, if we add it in the state. But I'm gonna go back to say, if we're on mental health separately, I would put these pieces getting out of the points or something else in the across the board. And then you really do make it a priority.
I'm going to ask that you really speak up because we don't have mics, so the only mic is the one that's.
I think your point is well made. We'll take it back to the board with the same recommend with our present list. We make it as an issue for discussion, much like what we saw at our last meeting when the committee brought to us the recommendations that came from their discussion. And we do the same thing.
So it sounds good. I think by speaking, hearing is that you can please go back and slide for me, please. So technically, we're keeping the top 7 priorities, but as we are working with our community partners to address those top 7 priorities, we are asking them to be innovative and thinking how to include youth gun violence as a priority within their addressing this issue. and they will get extra points for addressing youth fund balance across the board. And then that way, it's a priority without it being a separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what you said is yes, or number, about no given the way she did it today. We had 7 and then 8 popped in there. I think we're giving them the option that you described.
She's support what she's saying, not doing the big one, but integrating it into all of it.
I think that's what we're proposing, but I think that makes it a priority because we're asking everybody to prioritize it as a part of what's happening across the priority. That makes sense.
It's but then, but we also don't want to do. One of the problems that you have with the integration piece and it not sitting separately and providing additional points, and then also run the risk of mission creep. And people making their proposals to is where they think the greater opportunity and money is. And if they think that extra points are going to be awarded by virtue of that integration, then people may right.
Do that. I mean, that's why we push mental health.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. So I don't think we push mental health as mission creep, but rather partner with an organization or a group that specializes in mental health. So adding mental health to the cadre of services that you provide in your summer camp, and you do that by partnering with an organization that provides mental health services versus you trying to become the mental health provider. That's what I believe we would want. And part of what we said we would do is require some sort of collaboration. So that's kind of the first thing.
And mental health is entirely different than addressing youth gun violence. It's not necessarily comparable.
And then may I add one
Yes,
more
ma'am.
thing? And then I think the other reason why I felt it prudent to bring this up is because I think going back to Councilmember McFadden's point, maybe it isn't in priority funding, but it can be a priority. So maybe it's in innovation fund. Maybe it's in summer funding when we do that. I will say that when I participated in the stakeholder group, because as you know, everybody says, oh, it's got $8 million. Whoa, let me stop you there, because that money will not go far. And the council is being very deliberative about how that money will affect outcomes on the other side. And so my words to the group were, listen, the real way to combat youth gun violence is you start at the beginning. So you incorporate it into everything at the beginning, so that now 5 years down the road, you've got the kids entering, that 0 through 12, and they are learning nonviolent communication. They are learning de-escalation from here all the way, and then you see that movement. Now, that is truly something we can incorporate as we look at the top 6 to 7 priorities. By the same token, I would just like for the council to contemplate if there is an opportunity for us to partner with another funder. Maybe it's the Commission on the Status of Men and Boys. Maybe it is coupling a little bit of money with the $1 million, because that sounds like a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. But be open to having this as a priority, to be able to look at an opportunity that would allow us to partner and thereby address some of what's going on now, knowing that we are working to incorporate that into what we're doing for our younger children and those families moving forward, if that makes sense.
So, yeah, I'm proposing to add it as a big priority. I do think we will get more bang for our buck if we incorporate it into the others. So if the board wants to say we want to add a priority, I'm not closing that. But I think y'all have convinced me that this is important enough that we need to include that as a part of all of those. And I think you'll get better value from incorporating it into all, as opposed to just saying, we're gonna provide funding specifically for gun violence. I mean, I think we would get more people thinking, wow, if I'm working on family supports, how do I incorporate gun violence as part of this? If I'm working on, homeless, how do I incorporate gun violence into that? I think we get more people bringing more resources, more thoughts and ideas into approaching it than to just a gun violence program.
Exactly, and I agree with you, and that's what I'm describing, that they would be able to describe in a response for those that qualify, and for those ideas that somehow address those causal issues that lead to addressing gun violence can be mentioned, but I'm afraid if you talk about heightening it to where it provides additional points, then you run the risk of people writing points. That's the only observation I was making, but again, I think it can be addressed across the other areas of concern. Okay, but I mean, for example, if my early learning program is going to be qualified, it's not going to addressing youth gun violence for an early learning program. And so the points that we then award for addressing gun violence, they'll never qualify for them. So I think the point is the same that right, but I'm saying if you prescribe additional points for that particular issue for those that will not qualify, if they don't make those points, then you run the risk of those.
But you're issuing different RFPs for each of these areas, so that wouldn't occur. The RFP for high quality early learning experience, it's not that, it's a different RFP and the RFP.
So that's how, so what about the number 8?
That's why
We were saying about the number 8, make it a part of the different 1 through 7 with the ones that is a part.
Gotcha. Now I got you. Thank you. I get it clear.
But if I may. So if we go back, I'm sorry.
Just just like-
You know,
They have 2 points.
Yeah. it is. So if you go back and let's say we did, let me clarify by saying, I am not saying we are doing an early learning RFP. I am giving an example. If we did an ITN for high quality early learning experiences, and we bring back that the data shows and evidence-based programs show that teaching nonviolent communication to 2-year-olds, starting at 2-year-olds, helps to alleviate gun violence at 12. Put that in there, that addresses possible number 8. The next one might be, so to your point, and listen, I didn't know this until I participated in the stakeholder group and saw different providers that have those early pieces to address trauma that goes into alleviating gun violence. So for us, which was the point I was trying to make, we would be looking at impacting that from a early time over a period of time. But I also think that as a council, I think we should take back to the council, not trying to direct y'all, not being closed to the opportunity to partner and even invest in a program that might be addressing that interruption phase, which is where we are now. We are in a place where there are no interrupters. There's nothing that is interrupting that violence. And so if there is a way for the council to be a part of that, that is why I wanted to bring up possibly having it as an 8th priority, and maybe with an asterisk, I don't know. But to be able to show that we as a council, we see that this is an issue in our community. We are not putting our heads in the sand, and we will look for opportunities where we can responsibly invest in something that will help interrupt to try to alleviate it in the short term. Understanding that what we do in the long term will alleviate it if we get the outcomes that we're trying to get.
Do you not see interruption across all of those different things? I'm just trying.
I see prevention. I see prevention when you talk about at the early stages. That's not interruption. I think it's preventing the gun violence because you're teaching opportunities to learn how to solve problems other than being violent.
Parent engagement, family support services, family navigators, I see intervention. I mean,
I guess
interruption.
it could be interruption.
Interruption.
I see prevention.
Many of the evidence-based models that are in these spaces are prevention focused, because it's about that early, like, I'll say early intervention, which gives it that prevention slant, as opposed to interruption, but in this sense, that she's speaking about, but it can be both.
So for example, at the strategic planning meeting, we talked about St. Lucie County
Right.
and that program that they're running, and we're gonna try to have Ignite. And then we talked about how they take former gang members and ex-felons, and they have a program where instead of a teacher sending a child to the office because something is going on, or the child is not showing up, instead of that, they are calling the interrupter, who literally drops what he or she is doing and comes to de-escalate what's going on. That to me is interruption.
Okay.
That to me is interrupting that cycle, so that by the time that child gets to high school, they are now programmed to know how to de-escalate versus taking a violent route.
And to that interruption, I also see for like parent engagement, you got families that are falling off the cliff, okay? And these children are really in trouble. And you need someone that's interrupting what's happening in that home to get to that child before they go to school with that backpack, with the gun and everything else, because if you're engaging the parents and you're engaging the family and providing support. So then I do see both. I see prevention, but I see interruption. Maybe it's just my mind, but it's just
I think it is, but I also know that part of that is knowing which programs in the community provide that true gun violence interruption, because I would not expect a family navigator to literally intercept. Like, you see a youth with a gun, I don't expect them to intercept because they're not trained in that.
No, but I see the navigator realizing there's something going on with their child, and I need to intercept right now before they show up with it. But to me, that's an interception. But anyway, all right.
All right. Let's make are we gonna add number 8?
And it would be recommending to take it to
Point
council.
of order, you're definitely not making a motion right now, you're just things, you'll get to that part when you move into
At the very
item,
end.
what is that, item 8, just point of.
No.
You're in discussion phase, technically, where there's no motion on the floor, and we didn't agenda it that way.
Yeah.
When we get here, we're gonna do a forward. That will include, but there needs to be some sort of agreement.
That's trying to do some consensus.
That's-
Yeah. Move forward.
So you're,
I would like to suggest, however we want to do this, that we go to the full council and say, we see the need for including gun violence as a part of our strategic priority. And we have two options. We can either add it as a separate item, or we can incorporate it across all of them and ensure that every ITM that we do out for these, we provide some type of support for gun violence, and the council can decide. But I think we're saying, we think this is important, that we want to make sure it's included. Discuss the two pros and vote on.
I'm with you. You want to add on?
I'm fine with that. One last thing on the slide, so
That's silly. I just. Okay.
it's a request to remove the asterisk off of number 7, those likely to until summer funding.
Yeah, that was the question.
Because midterm, they say on average, it takes 24 times of meeting with someone to make a change, whether that's an academic change, whether that's a change in how their attitude, et cetera. So it is not the best to do mentor programs over a summer or a short period of time. It works much better when it's done over a longer period.
so if I may, we only put that because we wanted to try to start something this summer. Not that it was only in the summertime, but we were trying to move that up a little bit because we felt like as a part of summer priorities, just during that summer funding piece, but it can go beyond the summer.
Well,
But, so that's all we were saying.
I can tell you that apprenticeship and mentoring opportunities for young people is just ongoing and sustainable throughout the year. One, you have the programs that we facilitate through dual enrollment, through Lively. We also have some aggressive apprenticeship program and externship program and internship program. So I'm hoping that there may be some creative responses. That's what we saw with talent.
Well,
Right, so which is another activity that we also facilitate. So I wouldn't reserve it for summer plan. Let's see what we get in terms of responses to it.
but here's the thing, we are not issuing, at least according to the recommendations that the council accepted. With the staff that we have, we're not issuing current RFPs. We're issuing them at specific, and that's part of what you'll discuss too, at specific periods of time. But what we as a staff felt like apprenticeship and mentor opportunities was too important to try to let it go through that cycle, but rather go ahead and start that RFP for the summer for sure. Understanding that any other RFPs that come out or ITNs that come out, once you hear our analysis of the needs assessment against all of these areas, there would be a systematic way that all the ITNs are issued. We cannot issue all of them even a month apart. And so we have a timeline that will.
Well, they're not the only ones who would be a summer planning opportunity. I think the asterisk that leads you to believe that that is the only time it will be addressed.
Okay.
So you then will take the asterisk off, and then based upon the recommendation that you would make regarding all of them and where they will start. Some in the fall, some in the summer, spring. And then what I would do on the apprenticeship mentor opportunities, if I may offer this to you, so perhaps seek the counsel of Shelley Bell, Lyman Vocational Technical College, to give you some insight, because they're pretty much facilitating all apprenticeship programs for school age, and those ones who are like up to 20 years old, facilitated through that office. And then there's also guidance that we can also get at the state level regarding their statewide mentoring program. So I think that'll give us some. I mean, I don't profess subject matter expertise. It's just an area of interest in terms, as I thought, create pathways for our young people for careers. So it's not out of it.
I completely agree with, Dr. Jones.
You got the really.
That, I would like to see the aspects removed and just list all of the priorities, and then as you all look at the timeline, and that's when we determine where and when, because they're all equally important, you know, and just depending on what you all can manage and when, we can decide where, you know, what gets funded.
No problem. So we'll remove the asterisks, take that notation off. We will just, and we're gonna remove the asterisks from the allowance too. We'll just have that prepared according to your recommendation for that discussion, whether we incorporate or make it priority. Okay, so number 2 under this area that came out of the strategic planning session is Councilmember Paul Mitchell, who came and discussed a possible structure for the evaluation teams. And so the chair invited Mr. Mitchell to come, and so I'd like to ask him to come to the table and talk a little bit about what he proposed at the strategic planning session. And
Thank you.
so it's open for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the invitation. If you roll back from when we put out the ITN, and I know we're not ever doing it the same way, but it was an ITN. It was a whatever. It was a procurement that we put out on the street, whatever we call it. The feedback that I got was, I can't believe you're funding it, you're not funding that, you're doing this. And I was like, okay. There was a team of people that were selected. So that team was selected by our staff. They did the evaluation, and I can't remember if it was up to 6 evaluators. Each of them did a third, each of them did a half, however it may, and they scored it great. So there's no possible way each one of the members of the council can evaluate every one of the proposals. But I thought about it and I thought, I did review some of them. I asked that they be sent to me. I flipped through as we have actually
paper, but I scrolled down, I tried my best to look at some. And what I found was I was more interested in some than others. The ones that probably were more familiar to me because of my personal experience with as a parent. The ones that I thought my kids would be interested in, this is the ones I focused. But I didn't read them all. So when the grades came out, I didn't know who was up, who was down. So my thought was this. There, and I modeled my recommendation after Citizens Property Insurance Companies. As 9 board members. They were appointed by the governor, they were appointed by the CFO, 3 by the Speaker of the House, 2 by the President. The staff takes a procurement, they do large procurements on a very regular basis, and everyone's interested in who's going to get the money. Okay, you have a limited bucket of resources, you all are discussing here, very limited. Everyone's interested in who's going to get the money. So the way Citizens does it is for every procurement that goes out, chair appoints 1 member of the board to sit as the evaluator, as a board member evaluator. They don't have a vote. They sort of watch the process and kind of come back to the board and say, you know what, watch the process. I'm comfortable with the way it worked. And if any of the board members have questions, the second person is there to answer, but so is the board. And there's just a little more accountability built into the system. I don't think that you have 10 board members. So it isn't like you have to do more than 1 every probably 2 years. That you would sit and evaluate all of them. You would actually look at the applications. 2 good things come from this as far as I'm concerned. Accountability, not to say that we don't have a phenomenal staff, we do, but it holds everyone accountable. There is a board member that is kind of watching the process. And it says to the public, the board is staying involved. And then for very selfish reasons, I say this, as a board member, if you go through one of these procurements, let's just say that the first one was mentoring, right? If you're the board appointee, you're the board member who is appointed to oversee the process, you're going to walk away with real knowledge of the proposals that came in, and I think a truer understanding of what we're doing. So then when someone stops you in the street or picks up the phone and calls and says, I can't, it's just where I go grocery shopping. It's just changing, I can assure you. But when I went out to see the chair speak at Lively, the people there who said, I want to talk about this, about that. I just like a little more knowledge, or I'd like to say, you know what? If you have questions on how that procurement worked, board member McFadden was the board designee. She's the expert on that. Not to say that I can't look into something, but she is. So that was really where that proposal was coming from. Not that we eliminate the process by that we've incorporated already in some of the program, but that we have board oversight. And I know when this board involvement in how the grants are given out. And if there's one area that you're particularly strong at, I think you look at the 10 of us, we each have very unique backgrounds. Our people say about life, like, I'm smart on all these issues, right? But all the issues that we're going to tackle, I know there's got to be one that she really feels like, yes, I'm smart on this, but I'm really smart on this. I probably should. I can help as the evaluators are looking at all of the proposals, I can offer some guidance and advice, but they never would have had if it weren't for the fact that she was sitting on that name. So those are my thoughts. I do appreciate your giving me this opportunity, and there you go. All right. I'm sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
Appreciate him coming and sharing with us. Good thoughts.
I know that we did with our earlier process, we were streamlining it, we had to do something really fast. But I'm gonna close it all, if we have an evaluation team, I would like to see one group, and I can read through them. I don't want to go, but I would like to have some insight as to what's going on. I would really like to be able to answer questions in public, or, you know, a church, whoever speaks and asks me a question about something, to have some knowledge about a particular topic. So I'm going to propose asking one board member to be the accountable person for this particular topic. They read the proposals and just to be informed and understand what's happening. I think it's a good idea.
I know you have not participated in competitive RFP solicitations in the past. I know you have, and have you seen where board members have participated in the evaluation of an RFP for an ITN that comes back to a jurisdiction file?
So you were
Because I'm not, well,
Right,
but
so it's very different. So from
we're dealing with tax dollars, so that does make us somewhat.
Right, but I think the question is, the difference is, and I use the term I think we talked about before, exclusive,
Right.
because there's not that opportunity to go.
So, you know, but the recommendations come back to the full board.
So the full board, but they are sitting on a subcommittee and doing the RFP, they still don't go for giving them however this can be done, if they're not involved.
But they do come back to the full board as members who having participated in the competitive solicitation process. And as described on this, and I'm just as a bit, if this dynamic already exists, then I understand that, but I'm not aware. And it'll be helpful to me because when we deal with competitive solicitations, whether it's United Way, does not have board. The CHSP process that we have happened. Elected commissioners do not participate in those. They get recommendations that come through a vetted process, at which time then the body, and we create the body itself, whether it be the commission, United Way board, whomever is evaluating the expenditure of these tax dollars for the purpose of being put out for a competitive solicitation. They come back and they vote on them as a body of a whole, and there is no interruption because many will see that as disrupting a veil of the procurement process by having been involved in the evaluation of what they will ultimately have to vote on outside of the formal process. So, I mean, if there are others where they do that, and I'd like to get a legal opinion on this as well.
right? I mean, we're not voting, right?
We're not voting.
We're just reading the proposals and making sure that we can answer any questions or have an understanding of it. We're not even in conversation with the evaluators. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we would be in conversation with the evaluators at all. It's to say, I understand what is being proposed by all of these different people related to early learning or early support. But there's no voting, and it's just understanding the topic.
And then when the evaluations come back to us, you as a board member that participated then answers questions about the evaluations that we will ultimately vote on for funding.
If somebody says, do you feel as if these proposals are really getting to what we want? I would be able to say, I do think they'll be addressing them, but I'm not voting as to who is going to win the money over anybody else.
But you're making a recommendation
I
for the rest of the board.
a recommendation.
You're answering the question.
You're answering questions.
Maybe a better way to respond to this is say we did that program, we did the ITM. Three of us review and pick the top ITMs, we rank them. We then turn it over to another part of the committee that went in and negotiated the contract. So we have done it internally already.
But if I may add,
That's,
it was,
that was a part of our response. I mean, that's entirely different. That ITM, the procurement of those services for the board is different than the awarding of grants through our RFP process.
Recommendations, Mr. Jones. I mean, where, so if I were to
That's what
read.
you just described.
To make.
There's something about these. Citizens Property Insurance Company is a statutorily created entity, just like the Children's Services Council is created in statute and it gives government the ability to act. Identical, absolutely identical. The member of the council doesn't vote. The member of the council is there as accountability figure to listen, to watch, and it, just as Dr. Lund mentioned, I'd kind of like to hear from a board member who's read all of the other proposals, gone through them, and again, the 10 of us have built this collegial spirit that if Dr. Lund says, yeah, I look through and I do think we're going to, that the way that they responded gets at one of our priorities of gun violence or one of our priorities of homelessness or one of our priorities. Yes, I do think it was taken into consideration, and yes, I think they were evaluated accordingly. The same way that every procurement, we're spending the same amount of money, whether it's from a grant pot, it's the same amount of money, or for paying Q&Q, or paying for an executive director. Though that's why we have these committees. The only difference is in those committees, you actually voted. I'm not suggesting that someone vote. I'm just suggesting that they read the proposals and that there is someone on the board that is there to say to the public, we didn't just have these 5 people who, for example, when those 5 or 6 that were selected in the summer, I'm sure they were incredibly qualified. And I know we're going to be able to in the future, but it would just be helpful to have one of the 10 of us. Again, I don't think it should be the same person every time. I think it should be, board member one time, and board member 2, so you make your way around. And if the board member doesn't do it, obviously.
The thing that gives me pause is how we started the whole. Based upon the inquiry that we all dealt with the inquiries individually for a decision that we made as a body, right? I'll give you a perfect example. I was traveling when I was, and I got tons of phone calls. And you know what I said? So I abide by the decision that was made by my colleagues, because based upon the information that was given to them, they came to that conclusion based upon the scoring and all the rest of that. That's what they decided on. And although I wasn't there, I agree with them. Now that was and I was totally absent from it because I know that's how these types of decisions are made. I just think that I don't know that the intrusion on the procurement process that you're describing does anything to alleviate what will still be the responsibility that is shared by the committee of the whole of us on any particular procurement. The fact that you were the evaluator, the board member / evaluator, ex officio on early learning does not mitigate any sense of obligation or responsibility that the public will hold me to because you were the one who said it.
No, and I don't think it should, in the same way that it didn't remove you from being responsible for a vote that you didn't participate in. I would not use the word intrusion, I would use the word intrusion. I think the idea that if, again, if any board member says, hey, you know what, I've got enough on my plate, I don't want any more, I'll be fine with it. And I'm not really sure.
Only if we got come to a decision that everybody's got to.
Well, the board appoints, I mean, the chair appoints. So in this case, Dr. Glenn would start and say, does anyone has interest? Is there someone that, has a special area? Again, it's the chair's decision as to who it should be. If one of the board members is, otherwise has too much on their plate, it's fine. I just want some sort of board participation, even if it's just watching the process. Simply watching the process. I'm okay with the no vote. It will just mean that I feel an obligation to read all of these. And by the way, unlike the focus group where we weren't allowed, we are allowed in any of these hearings. So it's just going to be inviting myself in, as opposed to, just one person kind of going through the process.
Yes. And I don't want this to become both of the reporters, right? But when the committee, like Dr. Hill said on our evaluation, they made a recommendation to us. And of the recommendation, there were a certain number that we agreed that we would follow for their recommendations. It would be for me to review the ones that are recommended, such that I would agree with, but I would not, I don't know that I need to be a part of so the ones that make the cut, I didn't have to go back and read those. By virtue of their subject matter expertise, and that's why we made the choice to inform the process to pick persons who brought a subject matter level of expertise to the areas of concern that we had in terms of the program that we would evaluate. If we provide guidance on the process, where then lies an obligation for us to sit as a part of the evaluation.
Well, what I would say is, one, no one recommended what the cuts was. We made that decision.
Okay.
So, two, we made a decision in a rather arbitrary manner because we didn't know and read all of the proposals. And that's really all I'm saying is, we funded programs that scored, that the evaluator scored. I think one was a 68.5. I think that's the lowest one out of 100. So we funded it. I can tell you how good, how bad that was. And I didn't have anybody to look to. A board member looking over and saying to, Commissioner Cummings, Commissioner, you were part of it. That 68.5, was it is something that got a 68.5. Talk to me about how is that a good?
And that doesn't give y'all pause?
Just for example, all of the attorneys, really very simple. A statutorily created entity called Citizen Property Insurance Company that probably about 40% of Leon County residents will have as their insurance company, has an appointed board, just like us, identical to us. They do the very same thing. Mr. Jones, a grant is they award money from proceeds collected from taxpayers. There's nothing in statute that says it says you can collect up to a mil. That was part of the ordinance passed in the county. Doesn't say you can spend X amount in grants and X amount of administrative costs and X amount in a needs assessment, X amount in executive director. It says 10 people, 5 of whom will be appointed by the governor, 5 of whom are prescribed in statute. You can collect up to whatever your millage rate is, and you can spend accordingly. Calling it a grant versus calling it a payment for service, I don't see the distinction. So, and I want to answer the question sincerely and honestly. They don't have grants at Citizens Property Insurance Company. They have premiums, but it's a pot of money. Those dollars are expended accordingly. And building accountability by one of the people that is appointed in a method prescribed by statute, having them sit on the evaluation board, not voting on it, but having them sit there and watch the process and review all of the application, I see as a really reasonable thing to do. I do, and I'm okay going. I mean, it's not. I'm not fighting for my idea. I'm fighting for a little accountability.
We're not fighting.
No, I mean,
But that's why,
I'm
I'm
appealing here for
just to talk about it, because I wanted you to be able to clarify, because again, as I have just described, I'm not aware of any competitive solicitation process that award grants where the persons who ultimately vote are in any way involved in the process. But that's why I wanted you to describe what you had going on. I can imagine out of our very first IT meeting, there are things that we clearly can see that we can do better to improve upon it, such that we go both the awarding, the voting, all of those processes can certainly be improved for our next round. Again, this idea is just different to me, and I've been evaluating grants for more than 15, 20 years as a former grant awarded executive director for my own not-for-profit. So that's why I continue to ask, have we done this somewhere else? And there is, and so that's why I'm asking these questions, and that's why I'm inviting you to our meeting. Yes, ma'am.
And I know we're an hour in already, but my question is it possible that the board member, whoever is reviewing these, so what I would want for that person to be able to tell me is, you've read all of these, and can we get to what we want to accomplish? So what bothers me is if we give them to a bunch of people to evaluate, and they aren't at the heart of what we're trying to accomplish, they're going to give you the best one in that particular category. They're going to, score all of them, and they're going to say, this is the best one, let's give them the money. But I want to know is the best going to solve what we need to solve? And as a reviewer, who's read all of these, I would like to be able to say, from this pot, we're going to get answers, or we're going to get the solutions that we want. I don't just want the person with the highest score who may not give me what I need to get. I don't know if that's
If
clear,
that person has the highest,
but they may not do what we
and
need.
they have the highest score in the competitive process, and we award it to someone else because of how they may see that the board member would make that recommendation. I think you kind of set yourself up.
Board member to be able to say, I don't think we're going to get what we need to get from this process. They're not going to get to the heart of what we want to get, and then we have to decide: so do we redo this, or do we get to what we need to get in another way? So what I want is, if we say we need to be able to find housing for potential in the county, that's our goal. And after going through all of these, we were like, we're only going to try, meet the needs of 3 kids. But I need somebody to be able to say, what we got is not going to solve our need. And so then we need to decide, do we try to find somebody who can get to the 10, or do we find another solution? Because I don't want to give the money to someone who can only give it 3 if our need is 10. These, I don't know.
Not interrupt, offer a couple of thoughts. So a couple of thoughts. I think, it would be helpful for us to get a legal opinion from our general counsel. B, possibly the CSCs to see if they have board members who are involved in any way in the procurement process for services. And then these other comments that I'm going to make are from a staff perspective. and from a council perspective. So one of the reasons, and Chair Jones may be able to jump in on this. One of the reasons that the city of Tallahassee and Leon County went to a CHSP process where they have the voluntary evaluators and where those teams look for subject matter experts in each field, and they fill the eval team with different subject matter experts, is because they were getting lobbied individually to approve specific programs, right? So they literally, that's what was happening. And so it became a political process versus a true application process. So that was why they went to that, and they put that in the hands of these independent evaluators, and they stayed away from it. So one of my concerns would be, even though the council person appointed to that eval committee is not voting, it does open that council member up, because we would have to notice that. People would know that you're sitting as ex officio on that evaluation team. And I think you can expect that you will get people who apply for that RFP or that ITN and have to be able to respond to that, number one. Number two, while I respect Mr. Mitchell, you saying, if someone comes up to me, and Ms. McFadden was the team member who was the council member who sat on that evaluation. So I can't really talk intelligently, but you can definitely ask Ms. McFadden what she thought. Yeah, they can do that. But I guess for me, I would rather that you said, call the staff. They have all the processes. We have all of the applications, and we can explain that process, because it takes her out of literally having to defend or not defend, or maybe not comment at all, depending on what she felt versus what the council did. Then thirdly, in my opinion, and again, we have the legal opinion, if there's an ex officio member on the council, they don't vote at that point. When we bring it back before the whole council, do they then not vote again? Do they have the ability to say, I know that scorers scored this one high, but when I read it, I don't know that that one will get to the crux of what we want. I did read this one that scored 50 versus the 60, and I think that one will get to the core of what we want. So then the council could literally say, so we're not going to take the opinion, we're not going to give it to this one, we're going to give it to this one, because Council Member Glenn said she thought this one spoke to what we need versus the one that scored the highest. So we have to, at some point, if we're going to go with our recommendation, in my opinion, and I've served on evals as well, I've done it. If we are going to say that we use external evaluators in different subjects with different subject matter expertise, if we get to a point where we are not listening or going by what they say, then we are jeopardizing people even wanting to serve in that position. And that will put us in a position at some point where the council will have to. So that's just my thought.
I mean, as a lobbyist, the idea that only the 10 of us as members of the commission are lobbyable is simple. The evaluators are just as lobbyable. Just as there's nothing.
But we don't, I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, we don't release who those evaluators are. We would have to release one,
I knew who they were. I knew exactly who they were.
but not until after the process.
No, I knew going into it who they were. You guys listed them. And I knew one of the.
We did it. No, I thought it was afterward.
Okay. I just knew.
I think yes.
Yeah, so,
Which we.
but here, okay, so the point is, there shouldn't be a mystery. There shouldn't be a mystery as to who is essentially puts the authority with you to pick the evaluation. Well, it was the same argument that I made from the focus group. If I want an outcome of a focus group, if I want that focus group to tell me the biggest problem in the community is this, it's real simple. I'll put in that in that focus group, people I know are affected by it, and it will come out. The idea of having an accountable member of this body that sits and watches the process, I think is a help. I think it's healthy for the staff. I think it's healthy for the board, and I think it builds accountability and trust in it. So I'll start by saying that evaluators, there's nothing non-law about evaluators. The second thing is that my approach to all of the things that the council has considered is to take it from the public. By and large, that's landed right where, you know, the council, the rest of the councils. But I like to hear what concerned citizens are thinking, just as much as I like hearing from supportive citizens. The final point on the suggestion that, I mean, I'm looking at a perfect example. Number 8, we had one council member, Mr. Cummings, who brought up the issue of gun violence. And Sika, you brought it and put it on the agenda.
But I also did it because I had participated in a stakeholder group. So I need to fix.
It's a great thing, Brian. I do. I just pointed out that it wasn't something I'm not. Just because the executive director, what if one of us participated in that focus in a group where another issue came up? We just mysteriously put it on an agenda for consideration. I think finding a way to build accountability into everything we do is a healthy thing. And it is not a suggestion that I don't trust the people making decisions up to this point at all. I'm very comfortable with all the decisions that they made, including this. And I voted very comfortable. I'm saying that at any point along the way, if there is some question, we have built into the process safeguard, and we have a council member who is duly appointed via the governor or by statute. Period.
Well, first, we start out with other CSC we're doing and get legal counsel. But we decide what can we legally do. I mean, because I totally understand the point, but I understand that there are state, requirements that we need to put in place. So I would really like to hear what the legal counsel.
That is my recommendation. That we will do that.
If I could suggest that we think of this process as a leadership process, and I think we're going to be changing the law. So let's say someone goes out like as a promise, right, or something else, right? So Paul's point, I know a lot about supervising. That's not something a lot of people know about. It probably would be. So I'm going to go to saying, why don't we try this, right? And we call it implementation of the plan. Interested in an individual spouse. But I would like to know holistically, what are we looking at, let's say, in early childhood, and more importantly, what is that potential ROI that's on that? So what as a whole, or if I read them all, what as a whole are we going to do? Yeah, what are we going to get out of it? So I'm looking at the big picture, and I'm not so concerned about did XYZ nonprofit or ZYX school get the grant. I'm more concerned with being able to tell the public holistically this is where we're going. And I do think a board member is going to be able to bring that back and have that conversation in a very big picture way that will then resonate with the public, because it's not just about these 8 grants. And I will tell you, I went to a Florida Economic Council for those watching I got with a lot of questions about why did you give out so many grants? And, you know, what was the whole, they were very interested in where you wanted to change this big picture, what direction you're going. That's what I think is interesting about considering this process. I'm not as interested in what the 68.5. But that's why I think, let's be open to it. Like, I do think having people come back, and the United Way went through a really interesting process. So I was on their board for like 10 years. And at one point, I was working on the board, and we had a person doing that. And then they joined, and then they changed the process. And I will tell you, you know, it's just doing very well. That absolutely is gamified. People try to get other people that they know are their friends to be on that process. So to think that's not gamified is absolutely unrealistic. Now, I do think pulling back and not letting people know who is on your review committee is great. I also think we should make sure, I don't know if we did it this time, it was very smart fiscal people, and that was something that I'm not sure if we had subject matter experts, if we had subject matter fiscal experts that were looking at the ROI and paying attention to that for us. So those are a lot of different things, but again, I'm trying to say, maybe we can look at it like from a big picture standpoint, not, and we don't need to get, and maybe there's some rules to the game when we talk to the
And I
lawyers.
think, but I would hope that if we were to go with this process, there's got to be rules for the engagement. You, Dr. Glenn sat here and said that person could tell them whether or not they thought the person who the evaluators explored to us, if they did not agree, because she's a board member, she was coming to us, could say, well, I don't think that number one is quite meeting what I believe are the goals. Well, if there's a scoring process and we go outside and make recommendations outside of ones we score, I don't think we put ourselves in legal jeopardy.
Now we will, so if I may.
Because I'm thinking about the example that we've had in conversation, so that's why the legal review of whatever process we were to go with has to be with your whole issue is about accountability and protecting the integrity of the process. But that also includes the board members' involvement in the procurement process. Now, I'm a procurement professional. That's all I do all day. So what is much of what has been described and what we talked about sitting here creates a problem, particularly when it comes back to the lobbying of the board. But when you talk about it holistically, I participated in the process. I'm aware that person may even provide guidance. This is what the board expects for you all to do as a part of this process. That these are our values, so forth and so on. And based upon the evaluations that the RFPs that have come to you, we need you to recommend and score them the top 10. And then based upon our own process, we'll pick the top 5. And then you come back and you tell the board that I participated in the process and I can verify that I provided them with the instructions for this particular area of concern. And these are the recommendations here to it.
And they follow the instructions.
And that process is what we're talking, but some of what we have been saying in our conversation has provided the board with undue influence to the rest of their colleagues on what the process, on what has occurred in the evaluation, which gives me pause.
Let me also make this suggestion, and I'm wondering if this could be a happy meeting. So first, let me say, we will get the legal opinion, we will also go to other CFPs.
I'm just really sure that I care what others, other board members may. I would like the legal opinion. So what? Wait, isn't that great about life? Sometimes people are the first to do it, and it turns out to be a good thing. It's fine that we.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
If there are any pitfalls, if they've done it, going to license area process, you may be able to avoid some things, the council may say, we want to do it. But what I think would be more important is for there to be a council member appointed to the ITN development.
Right.
Because that is how, if you're going to sit on the other side, that council member needs to be involved in the development of that ITN to be able to ensure that the ITN is getting to the outcome that you want. And you can definitively say, yes, this ITN gets to that. In my opinion, this is just me, On the other side, if a program isn't getting to the outcomes, they're not gonna score that way. They're just not. I'm not a procurement professional, but I've done enough of them and I've served as a reviewer. If it's not hitting it, they're not gonna get that score. That being said, of course, I'm okay either way, for sure. So we will do our piece to bring that
And
information.
just to provide just a finer point too, we do go back to those old CHS United Way days. And it was it was a state of the art process. On brand new, there was nothing quite like it in the country. CHP, have a volunteer piece, all that other type of stuff. Created, they got awards for it, for the creation of that. And then serving all three, the United County with its CDBG dollars, the city with its CDBG dollars, and the contribution to United Way. It was great. And so I'm not entirely opposed. I just want to make certain that we have a process that is defendable and maintains the integrity that I know that matters to you.
Yeah, because I don't really, like, I did not pick apart any of the ones. I don't care about individual program. The points I made is it adds accountability. It also adds a depth of knowledge for the council members on a going forward basis. And when we have our strategic meetings like we did the other day, and you, the council member who sat through this process, you sort of come to the table with a little more knowledge, and we end up with 10 wise McFadden's instead of just one, because each of us has learned a little bit by reading all of the proposals. I think it's just one particular idea. I love the idea that whoever that individual is sort of following the ITN all the way through. Again, not dictating, oh, no, this has to be in there. Because, to your point, I don't want one council member to have undue influence on
There's a
the
lot
outcome.
of me about
I'm describing what I've seen work very successfully in a competitive procurement process in a statutory created entity. And so I know that I feel very confident.
But when you just say this, and I'm not familiar with citizens property, but I can imagine that members of the board then bring that RFP back to the board with the firms that have been selected, and that they then make any recommendations to their colleagues directly outside of the recommendations afforded through that process. And then when some of that, and that is
What they
some of
might
the
say,
language.
I've only known this fact at one time. That we didn't believe that the process was followed.
And then through the process, Mr. Trueblood and has even read out the image card. I see that. I'm sorry.
Except your baby.
Yes.
It's your child.
It's not that her name is.
I call you doctor from here on.
Yes, that's my sister, but,
Okay.
we'll get the legal counsel, if everybody's, can we land on that?
Yeah.
Legal counsel, research, and then we can talk about a path moving forward when we get back as maybe as a whole. Is that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so the last piece of it here is we're going to move to discussion of move to discussion of the timeline. I'm sorry. Ali, I'm gonna turn it over to you to get to our discussion of the.
Sure. There was a report that was requested that was developed. That report would include the gaps, assets, and opportunities for each of whatever you guys landed on in terms of your 1 through 6, 1 through 7, 1 through 8, wherever it's going to land. Identify if there's areas of opportunity, for example, number 8, to be folded into all of those others, and then to make sure that the report for each of those portfolios includes a description of outside. I put federal because to be clear that it's not just federal, but including federal funding. And this is what, out of the strategic workshop that we held, as a collective body, you said, this is takeaways, staff, this is what we want you to do, right? And so we're just kind of identifying those gaps, identifying where there's areas to layer in, and that was kind of where number 8 popped up, when you guys told us to, where can we layer in? Number 8 might be a layer in, but it might rise to the level of you wanting to do something totally different. And then the funding piece. And then provide recommendations for the process and timeline for each of the various funding segments provided in the process. So this was the kind of takeaways to staff from our strategic planning session. And the idea that we would prepare a report. So I italicized the last one, because we want to talk with you a little bit about this to make sure we're meeting expectations and everyone's on the same page. We would like to present the full report of the top 3 at the next Program Services Committee in late September. We believe that gives us enough time to do the job that needs to be done for each of those priority areas. It also allows the full council to decide 1 through 6, 1 through 7, 1 through 8. So the timeline, we just want to let you know of some of the things that are happening during the fall so that you're aware of that. And I wanted to show this. It's a lot. I will provide this to you via email so that you don't have to try to squint and stare at the screen. The red column on the right are council meeting dates so that you understand like when the full council gets together. Part of the process that we discovered with the summer funding that caused questions in the process was that there wasn't a lot of review time because it was such a compressed cycle. So this whole process, what we originally said that we wanted to do was to make sure that whoever was serving on the evaluation team, that they had a public opportunity. This should look very familiar in terms of, it's almost identical to what we did with the IT and the needs assessment, so that there was a public meeting and strategy session to kind of shortlist. So there was an understanding of everyone who applied, what those kind of original scores were, making some discussion about a cutoff point. Then there was a second phase where we called them back in. We did provider presentations. I think I put them presentations, callbacks is what that is, where they came, they did some sort of presentation, the evaluation. At that point, we're in the negotiation team. They then have a conversation. And again, there will then be another public meeting where they decide upon, we've gone through this whole process, we want to form this recommendation to the council. Then the next meeting, right, and that's that public meeting for final evaluation results, is intent to award. So this is part of our procurement process per our policy that we should be following and per state regulation, that you have a session where you issue an intent to award by the council, and that there is a minimum day period or someone wants to contest that, ask questions, whatever it might be. And once we get past that, then you can start the contract process. So then the next month coming back and actually having the contract approved by council. One of the lessons we learned and we discussed, I believe, was at the May council meeting, is that the compressed timeline took away a lot of these public meeting pieces. So it wasn't, I don't want to say it was done behind closed doors, but we ended up doing a simplified application process instead of a true request for proposals, request to bid, invitation to bid, invitation to negotiate, as defined.
It's generator liability,
All of that.
session where the evaluators get together and talk about their scores. And ensure that, oh, you know what, I did score that very hard, or I scored that way too high. So we didn't have a chance to do any of that.
So I wanted to start here with and the reason why we're starting with enterprise software of understanding this process. We have every intent to finalize the recommendation from the work group at their meeting on Monday, coming up on the 15th, to present that recommendation at the August meeting, approve the procurement, and then open it up to bid. You'll see that whole thing. This puts us, if we follow if everything goes to plan, with a contract implementation start with our enterprise software solution provider on January 1st, with phase 1 system deployment, which is that application, or would be the grant process as it's written now, starting May 15th. And then having phase 2 system deployment, which would be the full grant application, hopefully in place by October 1. Now that is malleable depending upon some of the decisions that might be made in terms of what comes first in each of those phases. But I just wanted to kind of show you that there's a lot happening this fall and managing this procurement for just the enterprise solution. And one of the goals of staff and the council is to have a nice system in place because it's going to maximize our efficiencies as staff for the application process. But more importantly, we can manage the application process and even some of the basic reporting. It's the, how do we show the ROI for each of the investment partners that we talk. So that's one of the things that we want to release this fall.
Hold on one second before you move it back, because what I want to bring to you all's attention, as well as the full council, we're talking about presenting the procurement on August 18th of 2022. It gets approved in September, and we can't even go to contract until January. And so this is a typical procurement process that will be put in place for every RFP we do. ITM, excuse me, because this is an ITM process. And so I think that that's important because we need you to contemplate this kind of timeline for each and every procurement that we do.
Minimum.
And that's in line with what we experienced. We did a little more compressed when needs assessment, but not much.
But it was a lot compressed for the summer. And so
Right.
that's what people saying, oh, the summer was never about hitting like the.
Every ITM, 5 months.
Everyone.
If we want to use the
If you want to use the ITM model, now if you want to use the RFP or RFA model, it might shave about 4 to 6 weeks of the time.
So we also talked about doing a PR branding, that whole piece that we said we were going to wait until the fall. So by waiting until the fall to even start developing it, this puts us out with this timeline at starting the contract implementation February. This is using the ITN model. If we wanted to revert this to an RFP model, which like staff will come and make a recommendation to council, depending on the timeline that could have had it started before the end of this calendar year. But that's also something that we wanted to manage this fall. We also talked about the capacity building type of funding. And so again, and I think we have a slide for this. Go ahead.
Let me jump in. Well, if we have a slide, let's go to the slide and then we'll come back to it.
Oh, this, well,
Oh, it's at the end. So I'll just jump in and talk about it. So as we were coming out of strategic planning and we came out of the council meeting and kind of preliminarily approved that budget, it hit me that capacity building, tech assistance, and training needed to be in place before we ever issue a priority ITN. So that drew us to 3 ITNs that will happen this fall that aren't even programmatic, they need to be put in place so we can get to the programmatic one. So that's where this slide is, to help us do the resource investment in the existing community partners. It's designed to build the operating capacity of service providers and grow their readiness. And then look at our small, and those would be small limited scope contracts. So on top of the other ones, we now really need to do the capacity building and continue to get those in place.
Aren't we partnering with CSC, the capacity building? I thought they were.
But we still have to do it in an RFP process. We can't sole source because there are several groups that do capacity building in different spaces. All of those spaces could be pertinent to really building the capacity of our. So we can't, we can do a sole.
I have a question on that too, which is if we have city and county, any is already doing capacity.
In the PH, they are. They're doing capacity building, however, they're doing it in conjunction with those processes, with those CHS processes. And we will have our own process, number 1, and number 2, our needs assessment clearly showed that of the providers that we evaluated, we had 130, 118, 115. In one area, we only had 1 program that was using evidence-based practice. So we got a lot of capacity to build. In early learning, for example, we only have 3, 4, maybe goal still
3 or 4 like actual providers.
actual providers. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of centers, but if we're trying to get to quality, that hasn't been a focus.
We focus on capacity building for like the first, I want to say first year, I mean, the thing that's not fair, it's kind of, but I agree, it's like the foundation of the policy, you gotta have the foundation before you can move forward. And maybe that's something to discuss, like, you know, do we spend a good chunk of time building the capacity so that we can go into the program?
Well, I'll tell you, Gambia, who's a new CSC, has issued an ITM, will be soon issuing an ITM for capacity because they don't have it, and that is what they're focusing on. Our thoughts were, not our thoughts, because we discussed it, is that get the capacity and tech assistance in place and deployed, ready for February 1, we could start them on our process for whichever priority funding it is that the council chooses, and then the summer, because we know for a fact that summer procurement is whatever the focus is that the council chooses to make that, because we want it, unlike this last one, and not just a over, but rather a specific study. And I'm gonna go change all this. That's basic.
So if we do the capacity building on this timeline, it does put that contract implementation at a start date of February 1st. The next 2 slides will be about priority funding and summer funding. So they would be in place to help assist during the application process. I do want to just clarify for this capacity building, it would be specifically to build the capacity of programs in order for them to be better prepared to respond and be more competitive for our procurement. The other capacity building.
Industry issue. Trying to move that type of investment issue, because that has been a problem that has plagued our industry here locally for that.
So both Jacksonville, so Kids Health Alliance and the Children's Trust did like system-wide capacity building applications just within this calendar year. So yeah, I don't know, I can't remember which fiscal year it operates one, but
It was this fiscal year.
so they're just releasing them, but they both released them specifically to bring on vendors to help their community providers be better prepared to respond to certain things. Now, Escambia and Alachua did a capacity building a slightly different way, in which our strategic plan we kind of talked about in the season with that early learning piece, which could be priority funding of building the actual capacity of a provider network in a specific area. So Alachua did one for building the capacity of after school and summer learning providers to raise their quality and understand what quality standards are so that they would be more equipped to collect data to show impact. I think it's Gambia, or the example that Michelle gave, and I don't know if the Gambia one had to do with early learning. So how do you raise the level of quality in around early learning so that you can then focus on actually funding more quality? So those are kind of 2 different approaches. This one that we were talking about was the piece of preparing them to be able to respond to RFP, ITM. So this is then what we're proposing for summer funding, and the bolded ones would be presumably committee, like this committee where it would hear the recommendations. So love that the suggestion, and I don't even know that we had talked before, putting this in here about the committee to prepare the procurement. Whether it's a person that's starting with it, if it's the whole committee making a presentation to the committee first, so everyone can weigh in. This is just a sample. But this would give us enough time for summer to have an implementation date of May 15th. But to build in each of those pieces, so this is not doing the ITN process. It's a little bit drawn out. What you'll see here is that there's informational webinars built in, and the response time is extended instead of the standard 21 days that's required by law. So on these ones, it's giving them extra time. And you will also see that we built in provider presentations, which was something that was the feedback we got from the evaluation committee. Judging a program on purely paper doesn't do it justice. We want to have provider presentations. We recommend provider presentations built into that as well. So that's where this would kind of come in to give them time to do that. Then those evaluation results, again, they would be in the public, so anyone could participate in the discussion process. Were the rules followed? Did you do this? What opportunities for them to do the integrator reliability and have those discussions before the committee makes the recommendation.
Provide a presentation.
No, the evaluation results.
The evaluation results. And so I participated in one of those in my former job when we applied for funding through the Children's Trust of Logical County. And literally, you come in and you listen to the evaluators give their scores and why they gave that score. And in some cases, evaluators changed their scores. In other cases, they lowered. In other cases, they said, yeah, I'm not rating because of whatever the reason is. So it was the first time I had participated in that type of evaluation, and I appreciate it. Granted, we won it, but it's neither here nor there. Okay.
So that would be for the summer. So where do we fit in with priority funding? So this is where the staff has kind of landed as a recommendation to the committee of when we might present the first priority funding procurement. Now, the reason why this is January.
So is the assumption that we will only do one priority at a time? Is that the assumption?
I think that
That,
is the request.
that would be my request.
And then another very loaded question. In your opinion, how many ITMs can the staff manage at once?
So if we went with the timeline that's being presented here, we would be managing 5 processes. 3 that would incept this fall and 2 that would incept in the spring. And I think that's about all we can do. Now, the 3 that will incept in the fall will not happen again. So that opens us up for more procurements as we go into the next fiscal year. It just so happens that we are still in the space where we are building our capacity, getting our processes in place. So those 3 ITNs are about us being able to manage the process.
So the 3 are the enterprise, well,
Enterprise solution, PR branding and public
PR.
awareness,
okay,
and then the last one would be the capacity.
the capacity building, and those are the, right, the first 3, and then the 2 in the
Spring
spring would be the
would
summer.
be the priority funding and the summer.
Okay,
With the thought that that first priority funding would get a 15-month contract so that it goes all the way through, so that we do the next priority funding, so that the funding starts October 1.
So to clarify, the priority funding, the initial one would be the early childhood.
You all have
Well,
to
we have to
decide. Yeah, so this is just the timeline, what that priority funding is, you as a council will decide.
So that's what's not showing here, is that at the next program services committee, potentially late September, we would bring the report back to you and kind of with all the things that you asked, so that you could then decide, let's start here, let's go there, let's layer in this, let's ignore this, let's make a excellent, sorry, I didn't mean to delay, so sorry. Let's put this, let's do an, like, we want to pursue this with an innovations track. I will say that within the first priority funding, that could include priority funding and an innovations. We could manage that at the same time, so that we could do innovative funding and priority funding if you wanted to stay within the same priority, but we could potentially, like, if you wanted to do it that way.
so can I recommend for the board meeting that you give us a calendar? So we can see like, okay, this is where these 3.
You want to see the intersection.
I want to see, right, I want to see what's overlapping and when.
And we'll put them in different colors.
Yeah. Okay.
No, we'll do it. Okay. I'm sorry. Charge.
Let's try to get this. Oh, sorry, there's something. I have 2 things for conversation. Number 1 is, whenever, you're gonna issue that much money, let's say it's the middle child priority funding. I feel very strongly that you have to issue an evaluation item for at the same time. Because if you don't, then we will have lost 15 months and the evaluation team can't come in at the end and tell you how well we're doing. And I know that the primary questions I get is, how do you guys know you're So I feel real, and I'd be happy to give up a different one of these on the front end. But I feel very strongly that we don't embed evaluation, and usually it's about 8% of the cost of your program, right? I mean, you probably go to the your opinion and get somebody to give you a better estimate. That's what I do now, off the top of my head. So I really feel like we've got to think that process through, because we're gonna have a lot of questions afterwards. We can't say, what was our return on investment? How much money did we spend per student, whatever, however you want to, and how do we move the needle? What were the differences? Do we have a goal, of X number of goal seals at the beginning and the end?
The last day is not the day that is supported, but the day that evaluations.
Well, no, I'm saying that if I am bidding on a contract for evaluation, I have to start when the program starts. And I have to be evaluating it all along, and that's missing. And there's nothing more important to me than being able to say back to the public, we were fiscally conscientious and we were looking at driving results, and that we had somebody measuring that.
Now, may I offer, or understanding that so for outcomes that we're trying to move the needle, the council approved that we could do 1, 2, or 3-year contracts. So let's just say for priority funding, in my mind, it's a 3-year contract. Understanding that year 1, there will be certain things. Year 2 bills on year 1. Year 3 bills on years 1 and 2. And then so in there you got your evaluation. But what we know is that we are trying to effectuate will not come in just a year. It's going to be over a period of time. So in my mind, that first year evaluation might be you met the expectation, you hit where we thought you would hit. That second year evaluation is showing maybe a little bit of needle movement. By that third year, we know that this program is moving in the direction so that by year 5, we can see, yeah, we've moved this here.
I think life is asking for an evaluation contract.
Yes, in tandem.
And remember, the results for year 1 are not the same as year 2.
Right.
And
Right.
year 1, if you can positive, I'm just mentioning trends. If you can see that there's less teacher turnover or fewer kids moving between 4-year-old programs or whatever you're working on, you know later on you're going to get better results, right? So what the evaluators are going to be doing is evaluating it very different in year 1 than in year 3. But they have to be there from the very institution because they have to work very closely with these partners.
So we're adding.
To drive
Evaluation RFP
up there to the public. And it could be, I mean, we have to think that through, but I mean, if I'm saying on the front end, like this, if you have to give something up, I was concerned. $50,000, having managed a public relations firm before, $50,000, you can't do anything. So.
That's a clear question about the evaluation piece. Because we were talking about the priority funding being an ITN, could it be part of that procurement process?
And you just want to put the party group to be separate from the group.
It can't be like the cost. Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't mean it part and parcel of, could it be simultaneous? Because the piece that I'm thinking about is, do we know what we want the evaluators to do if we don't?
How to win it, right? So are you gonna, so let's say if under priority 1, you're gonna, I don't know, some big group has an event, we don't really have this, but let's say you get 15 different providers who agree they're all gonna try to get OCO or whatever, right? And that you're gonna drive, then somebody has to analyze all 15, so they have to know after it's won what it was. So to some extent, I think you're issuing it shortly after you know
Who's getting?
it, because they have to be able to respond. Is it 15 years? Exactly, that's right. Is it? So it technically would come after, the final, like basically the intent to award. At that point, we would know really what the design is and what we're giving out. And then we can maybe, is it still an ITN, or could you maybe do an RFP for something?
You could do either, if you're trying to get around the university system. Sorry to say it like that, you don't get a 20% overhead, there's a lot of good groups that are out there that do that, and, you can. I mean, I would be very careful, sidebar about what we do as admin, because the university's trying to work you out.
Oh, so with that, so with that, Chair, if we can, we will add an evaluation IT into this timeline. RFP, IT, we're just using IT, yeah, I think we're using it, changing it, so we'll make that decision. And I will begrudgingly say we do. So can we not put it on hold yet? Can we not get rid of this? Because in my mind, the PR and branding, once we get it awarded, that's an easy one to manage in my mind. Because that's one that I've done.
So if you're at $50,000, that's really what we're talking about. I just don't know that you're gonna get enough value add for costs. And so I think we have to agree, if we're doing it, I'd rather see the money. I'd rather see somebody that goes for navigator, let's say, invest in a public relations street team on the ground, coordinated with a video things so people know that they have access to these folks or something like that. When we were talking about how could you embed some of these documents, I think the PR was a great one to embed into some of that other. And to think through how we might do that versus if it's generically to promote, I think I get a lot of pushback.
I think it was both. I think it was both. But let me say that. We need some branding. We need a look and a feel. And I'm hoping that we don't go into year two, although Holly did a great job with our little circle. And our colors. I'm hoping that we don't go into year two without a brand, something that we put out there that we are proud to put on anything that we fund, that identifies us. And I have lots of talent. I do. I'm not a graphic artist. I cannot come up with a logo. I can't do all of that. So can we just not throw it out of the ballpark yet? Can we build in, I am requesting that we build in this evaluation, ITN, RFA, RFP, whatever it is. And I don't know if I can say this, but I'll go ahead and say it. My stronghold with some of the firms that I've had some connections with is that they would do it for that. They would do what we need done for that and maybe give us some value. I'm sorry.
But for me, marketing goes back to some of what we talked about tonight. And that's the issue of accountability. Those persons will be putting out our processes. They'd be talking about, they would be responsible for sharing with our public what has been our activity and no.
Great day.
It can be, so what we were planning to do was, we had talked about him winning these street teams, talked about developing all of that. So we would put all of that into that PR and awareness ITN. So it's kind of two pieces. It's developing our brand and then helping us promote the things we did in the summer, the things that might be coming.
Suggestion. I feel like I don't think there's agreement on understanding what PR navigator. I just maybe it gives you guys some time to go back and think it through a little bit more.
Did we go on the budget already for the market?
We preliminarily passed it.
Yes, that we don't have agreement on what it is, so you guys can go back, come back to us and say, what I really wanted out of it was a one and whatever it is, so that there's maybe a clearer understanding of what it is for $3,000. I certainly didn't have it.
To define the objective of the PR brand.
That's a description.
Well, I think at one point it was, and then it got scaled back. Originally, when we were gonna have a larger line item, it got scaled back.
Question, based upon the evaluation piece, is that what you do? The
It
evaluation IT?
is not, but it should go under priority. It would be an IT.
And it's also included slightly under innovative funding, the way that we've defined it, that definitely for innovative, we want to make sure that there's a research question involved and how, if we do an RFP and procurement for the innovative funding, whereas the priority funding, they're supposed to be using evidence-based. But to your point, we'll absolutely add.
Yeah, we can do, we would, so there would be evaluation in that, because whatever priority funding you do, you're gonna be able to evaluate, right? And just this last thing on the whole awareness. The recommendation coming out of the needs assessment is that we need to have branding and awareness in the community of what we do. And we added street teams to that and all of that. So we will go back and use that definition so that it is clear what we would be, what we're asking.
Thank you, so thank you.
So we did a different evaluation for each of the priorities. So the evaluation funding for early childhood and living or childhood will be totally different than the evaluation for, right, something totally different, because I do think the evaluation process is different, and we need a group who really understands that particular topic. So we
The
can
evaluation
that out.
has to be shaped on it.
Right.
We are at 7:31, so let's try to get. Quickly on the community forum, we had 53 participants, 7 council members were there, thank you. The ones who weren't there literally were out of town and not available, so that's pretty cool. We had 42 agencies, and of course, 2 community members were there. Chair Jones was there, and so we were so glad to have him. And then we were able to discuss the types of funding, and we already talked about the capacity building and the need for that type of ITN. And so we are now, any questions? Okay, cool. We are gonna go through that slide. And so what we decided is you all can't give a recommendation on priorities for the fall because you don't have the information. That's what we will be bringing back in September. And so I think at the number 7,
Yeah.
when we talk about the formulation of a committee recommendation,
We need feedback from the council.
I think the 2 things that have come out of this is I have it listed too, I just have to. Would be adding number 8 as a priority versus having it incorporated across the 7 that we already have. So that would go back to council for discussion. And then the second one would be getting a legal opinion on the pros and cons and legality or not legality of having a council member sit in on the procurement process for priorities.
And I would still like to check on yours.
We will. That's so it's such an easy process.
And the third was the evaluation.
Like the evaluation.
You know, I often find, it depends how you ask the question to get the answer you want. That's how the lawyer.
Absolutely.
No, but my point is, if you go in and you say, they want to sit in, you know, so that beginning conversation on it as a member, it's very different than sort of that ex officio, big picture process person. So I do think how you ask that question and what that person's role is, or what they feel is an appropriate role, is a really
So this, because I mean, because you think about it, the conversation more from how we started at the very beginning to where we ultimately ended up our conversation. I think it would be helpful if we were to put it.
And maybe that's based on your words, and I can pop it up on the board if you'd like me to. But so the recommendation would be to include a board member as a chair appointment to serve as an ex officio participant to an individual procurement process, serving an accountability role.
I was just gonna say, so let me go on record as saying, whatever is decided, I'm good with. I am here to ensure that the council wishes are followed. I provide my opinion and then I'm good with whatever is provided. So I can put it in writing, but I still want to talk to Fred. I want to talk to him and say, listen, there's been a recommendation that the council chair be allowed to appoint a council member to serve as an ex officio member of an evaluation team of a priority funding ITN. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's what we asked.
And that's it.
That's the difference between the grants versus bids.
And don't forget, for the ITM, they can be that person, as long as they're gonna do it from the very beginning.
Right.
Development of the ITM.
Absolutely. So if that is accurate, then that really is the right. Those two things. Three.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're getting a legal opinion. No, all right, no problem.
We'll get a legal opinion on the ex officio member, council serving council. A council member serving as an ex officio member of the evaluation team for priority funding, including being in the formative stages of the ITN. We're going to take that to the council, the options of having an A priority or an interwoven priority. And then third, we will be adding a timeline for the evaluation ITN for the priority funding. And I am going to add to that, if that's okay, summer funding as well.
All right. I like it all. Everybody's good.
So we are at the point where we need to take.
Any other comment?
I have a comment and then
Do my best to make this painless. The blending of time and money is a trial which you rest in this. Not just money, not just time. It's the forethought that we want to reach our goals in the organization. Is going to perfect timing, I believe. That meets your stated goal, that we enumerate them very, very succinct. One stated goal is community engagement and involvement. Another is system reform. Another is capacity building. Another is creating innovative strategies. I have never experienced successful organization serving family members, from all the way through elders, that didn't have a very orchestrated, involved community presence and volunteer presence. Case in point, you are sterling volunteers to get this movement in the right direction. So, however it fits your timeline, which is really a moving train right now, trying to figure that out. No offense, but I wasn't that real to figure out exactly how it's going to be put together. I am going to plead for a serious conversation with a representative sample that you offer, whether it be 2 or 3 council members perhaps, or maybe 2 or 3 citizens, to look at the big picture vision for creating an unprecedented volunteer action program on behalf of children and families of this community. I see it as an unprecedented recruitment effort, and I see it as an unprecedented involvement effort that others will replicate in the coming year. I'll give you 3 quick numbers and then I'll rush. Number 1, the 10% of Leon County's citizenry of every age, which is actually 30,000. The county is 300,000. Invested 2 hours a week or 100 hours a year. That is 1 million hours of the gift of time and relationships building with our children and our teens and our young adults. Multiply that by 3. Because I see this at least as a 3-year vision for fruition. That's 30% of the population, giving the same 2 hours a week or 100 hours a week, is 3 million hours. Now, just envision the number of reading tutors and mentors, of teen companions working on mental health issues, not in STEM progression, but in complement. Imagine how many young people will learn about business through relationships with the business. What I think exists now is only a partial piece of a bigger picture that we can implement in this community at this time. So again, I see this as a major initiative that I would like to be part of as an advisor and advocate. And more than that, I see this as a unprecedented value-added priority of this council that others will learn from and emulate. More can be said as we continue. So if this does not fit where you're going, I would be astonished. But I think it does fit where you're going. I just need to question how we weave it into your other processes. And I'm willing and I believe able to guide you to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Thank you so very much for sharing. Any other additional public comment?
No, comment?
All right, thank you. We'll now move to item B under section 7. Are we managed that already?
Yes.
All right, so next meeting day.
I think it's like.
3% out there, right? 103 recommendations moving forward.
I just wanted it for the record before they.
Yeah. Next meeting day.
We were hoping
What was
in September.
in September?
The 22nd.
That's what we're looking at, September 20.
That's for this committee, right?
Yes.
That's the Friday.
Yeah.
The 26th actually would be, there might be an agenda review meeting if we.
No, that's.
So you. So let's do 27.
Oh, school is closed.
So the 26th would be probably a better day.
So you can't,
Oh.
so we can't be here.
Sure.
But I was. So complaints about the recording and the sound. So unless we solve that issue, we might.
So I did see a mic.
Oh.
So that would get, that would be. We'll do a doodle poll. We'll do a poll. But we're looking at the last week. So that last week.
I do have a school board meeting on the 27th.
And we are trying to incorporate everyone's calendars. And the next meeting agenda will be the results of our takeaways from the strategic planning session. And it will incorporate the outcome from the August meeting with the items that you all.
Is any final comments? Well, thank you all, ladies. Thank you for being patient. We were master of this. That's not right. So, this has been cool.
Thank you. We are.
We are.